Welcome. So I just listened to a really good video that confirmed some things for me. It confirmed the content creation. And you hear a lot of stuff. You hear people say, oh, make this, do this, make your video short. Your content's too long. You should change your intro, outro. And generally, I ignore that information unless I've paid for that information. Unless I have a strategic coach that's telling me to do something very specific. So just recently, I got some input on my podcast from someone. She's like, you should shorten your intro. You should. Okay, maybe she might be right, but I didn't pay for that knowledge or that expertise. And she doesn't understand the full extent of the podcast, which reminds me, I just finished a podcast with a founder. This founder created a podcast booking software and a service. And one of the things that she said was, think about podcasts as collaboration and networking platforms more than listening platforms and content creation. So we're creating content, but with interviewing and guesting, the format that I use on my podcast, I like to think about it as collaboration, which is what I do. So now let's jump into the topic I want to talk about. The video that I watched, I'm going to tell you the name of the video. It was a video by Alex Hormozi. And the name of the video was, I tried posting only business content for 30 days. And he talked about some things that were revealed in posting that only business content. And I'm just going to go over those things for my audience. And I'm going to share my perspectives and my insights on that. And I'm also going to use this podcast as a teaching tool for not only myself, but anybody else that's listening that might have people in their ears giving them unnecessary input without understanding their journey, their goals, and their objectives. Okay. So part number one, he talked about, he built up an audience. And if I go back over to his YouTube channel, he has 2.4 million subscribers. Okay. So he's been testing data. I believe he was testing it for about 6 months. You want to understand how well he tested it? Go check out the video. And I discovered him probably a while ago, but generally I hate to follow trends and jump on bandwagons because I'm contrarian. However, when information is valid and true, you want to listen to it, right? And a video popped up of his, and he was talking about maybe the key to success or something like that. And he was like, the key to success is you. And I was like, okay, this is the truth. Somebody's here telling the truth. It's not the method. It's not the framework. It's not the webinar. It's not that stuff. The key to success is you doing your best. And he talked about 5 different types. That's another story for another time. So he went over 6 things that he shifted inside of his business. And it was really interesting because it confirmed a lot of what I learned from my paid mentors and paid coaches, people that have paid for their expertise. And I'm not saying that free input is valid, or family and friends that have, oh, you should make this change. I'm not saying that their input is not valid, but you should be careful when listening to them, right? Especially when they don't have their own thing going on. All right. So number one, he talked about, he made a shift in his content, and the shift in content was from edutainment to education. And you're going to hear a lot of people say, you want to entertain in your stuff, and you want to make it so people are entertained, because people lose sight of different things and they get distracted and their attention is only as short as a goldfish. You're going to hear that stuff. And you're generally going to hear that stuff about what's happening online. And it's not true. That's completely not true. There is an audience out there that doesn't care for being entertained the way that most of us assume. It's not a majority, but there is an audience that cares. And while he was breaking down and he was talking about things in his video, he said 9% of the population, or maybe his audience, are business owners, and that's who he generally serves. So by him only focusing on that 9%, guess what? He's missing out on 90% of the other people, and the 91%. And that 91% of people, he tried serving them. And the way he tried serving them was through edutainment. And edutainment is education with entertainment involved. Got a lot of feedback from his audience and a lot of feedback from the people that he generally served. And they all said they didn't necessarily appreciate that content. So The reason why I'm bringing that up is because people will tell you, be entertaining. They'll tell you all this stuff where you're going from teaching or showcasing your expertise or giving someone specific results to being entertaining, turning things into some kind of show or play. And that's not necessary all the time. Sometimes there's an audience of people that just want to learn or just solve a very specific problem, and they don't need to or care for being entertained. So I'll caution you to reconsider if somebody's telling you to be entertaining and fancy up your stuff, etc. Take that information with a grain of salt. The other thing about it, which I might talk about a little bit earlier, I got some notes that I keep referring to, was he made different types of content, different styles. And he made a style where he would just talk and he would deliver value by just talking and delivering that information. And then he had another style where he would call post-production, where there was a bunch of stuff flashing on the screen, all this stuff like high production, high fidelity content. And the content that did the best was the content where he was just raw, uncut, and there was as little post-production as possible. Those were the results. Now, part of the reason why I'm so excited about this is because that's my style too. Part of the brand here is raw, uncut implementation. Do it now, do it fast, go get the results. And you worry about editing later, as an example. And in part of implementing the things that we teach and the things that we demonstrate here, you realize you don't even need to go back and edit that stuff. I don't like to tell people that, but I like them to have that realization when they're implementing it. Right. So that was part number one. Shift number one, from edutainment to education. It's okay to just provide people with education. A big part of the reason why I don't like the online content is because it's too entertaining. It's very distracting from the essence of the message. I'm here to learn, and I want to pick up very specific things. And I want to get very specific results. And there is an audience out there for that. Number two that he talked about, which I did not relate much with, was the for us to for you. So he was creating content for part of the reason why Alex created his content was because he would create it for the people he worked with so they can gain value and they can level up. Now, the for you content was he talked about a broad audience and he talked about a narrow audience. A broad audience is the general masses, people that you might not see every day. It's the general population is how you want to think about it. These are the people that need edutainment because they're not necessarily interested in what you're offering or what you're doing. So the for us content that he was creating before was for business owners and people that were of his team. Now, the for you content was for the broad and the general public. And after they checked the stats, after they checked the results, they found that they were doing better with the for us content, the content for people that are similar to who they are, business owners, people that are looking for very specific results. They don't care about entertainment. They care about getting what they want to get out of the video. Now, part of the reason why I mention that is because I'm going to talk about this in a point on shift number 4, which is part 5. So the for us to for you, he went from for the broad audience and he went more narrow to talk to his colleagues, his associates, and people within his niche and with his industry. Now, the next thing I hinted on was from wide to narrow. So wide is the broad audience, is when you're trying to reach the general public. Wide would be, according to his stats, there are 9% of the population or the audience that he was talking to were business owners, and 91% were not business owners, for the sake of simplicity. Now, a broad audience would be trying to serve that 91%, trying to capture their attention and get them interested in what it is that he was offering or what he's talking about in his video. The narrow approach would be for him to just focus on that 9% of business owners, which is what he did. So he talked about he went wide and he served that broad audience, that 91%, and it didn't do well. It did okay with views, but it wasn't translating into revenue. Now, that's one thing that a lot of people get caught up on. They get caught up on views and I say branding with quotes because they worry about the wrong things. My video looking pretty, their video looking pretty, having music and flash all over. That's not always the right objective to have. When he went narrow and he focused on the business owners, they said, we don't care about the high production quality. We want you to sit down and talk and go deep on the conversations that you talked about in the past, which was business. And that served them well. And he got more engagement by doing that and giving them what they wanted. Something else that he mentioned was, my audience has been asking for this. They've been telling me, go back, or they've been telling me, we like your older stuff. These weren't his exact words, but that's what he was saying. And he wasn't listening. And the reason why I mention that is because sometimes you're going to have an idea of what you may think the audience or the person that you serve may want. But you should always be listening to what they're saying. It's not easy, but once you get it, you can start to achieve some real results from it. So a really good example for me, people will ask me, what is a part of my brand is implementation. And I specialize in implementation. That's part of my branding, but that was not a concept that was made up by me. That concept was kind of put together and assembled by me listening to what other people were saying. I did not struggle with implementation, and I would do it and people would come up and they would say, Jerome, I understand these concepts. I understand the ideas. I understand everything. I'm just struggling with the implementation. And I heard people say this several times over. And when I signed up for my marketing coach, they said, well, her name's Darcy. Darcy said, well, what are people asking you for, Jerome? And I said, they're asking me for implementation. I'm not doing anything spectacular or amazing. I'm very transparent. I'm very straightforward. And they just want me to implement, or they just come to me for accountability or coaching. So the things that I do, it's nothing magical. It's very practical, and people just need help with that. And they're looking for that transparency. Another thing that I get a lot of the time is, Jerome, you keep it straight. You're honest. I know you won't lie to me. You're straightforward. I know I can come to you for the truth. These are the things that people have been asking me for. And I've been listening to their messages and the things that they've been saying. And I've been leaning more into what they're asking for. Right. So my audience is asking for implementation. My audience is asking me not to lie to them. My audience is asking, how can you help me get there faster? That's what my people are asking for. But if I tried to assume and I wasn't listening, I might think they want edutainment or flashy TikToks or something else out there on the internet. Okay. So I just wanted to talk about that. Now, next, from views to revenue. Now, he talked about this. He had data. Go watch his video. He talked about this. Views to revenue. Now, why does that matter? Because I already hinted at this. We can't get so hung up on vanity metrics. The views were not translating to revenue in his business. A lot of, especially the people that I'm talking to, you're a real estate agent, a coach, an investor, you have a business or you're part of a business, and you want that business to generate money. Views does not directly translate to money. And he even talked about his views, like he got fewer views on some of the videos that he was creating, but the revenue increased because his website, they would go to his website to buy books. They were more engaged. They were willing to spend money because they learned, this guy can help me solve my problem. He knows what he's talking about. Let me go purchase a product or a book or something from this gentleman, because he was delivering value and he was helping them get specific results at specific times, right? It wasn't edutainment. It wasn't entertainment and flashing and flying. It was very specific result. Deep dive. He was deep diving on business concepts and business topics. Okay. Shift number five that he talked about was prioritizing long form content over short form content. So a gentleman, his name, I can't remember his name, John just made a post and he was like, he said, a lot of people wonder why my content is long. And it's because I have to teach deep concepts. And here's the thing. I agree with him. If you are someone that believes that you can learn everything that you need to learn in 60 seconds or less, especially in business, you are probably not the right client, because number one, you have the wrong mindset, right? You're impatient, and in a negative way, because impatience is not always a negative. You're impatient in the wrong regard. This stuff takes time. It requires you crafting and becoming a better person. It requires you implementing strategies. It requires you learning and educating yourself. And there's no way you're going to learn how to be successful in 60-second clips, right? And 60 seconds is being generous. A lot of times you'll see clips at 15 seconds, 30 seconds. You can't learn much off of those clips. So he talked about emphasizing long form content because that content is what generated more revenue for his business. There was a caveat. He said that he was not going to start the short form content, because guess what the short form content does? The short form content for his business and what he does generates him some brand awareness. So it wasn't directly correlating to sales and revenue in his business, but it was useful for brand, so people could understand who he is, so they could remember him, so they could see his face, and he's married, his wife's face. But it wasn't correlating and translating directly to revenue like the long form videos were. Now, shift number 6 is assume nothing. And when he talked about assume nothing, he meant don't assume that people know you. So you will hear people say, cut out the intro, cut out who you are. They'll tell you to cut these things out so you can try to entertain the goldfish attention span. And I advise against that. If you have to cut out an intro to save 10 or 5 seconds, I don't know how valuable that customer or that client will be. I'm not saying don't do it, but you really have to start thinking about these things. What's the best use of your time? Spending time editing a video so you can cut off 15 seconds of an intro, or making a long form video, a 5-minute video where you actually deliver what you say you're going to deliver to that customer or that prospect. Which one is more important? So you see that in the content that I create. You hear me say you hear me stutter, you hear me say right? We do very little editing because the message is more important than the post-production. That might change in the future. We might do some editing in the future, but as of now, we're already delivering value, and us making a few mistakes here and there or not editing a video is not going to stop the party. There are plenty of people that appreciate the content without all of that fancy stuff. So that's something I wanted you to know. Now, so let's recap the six things that we talked about. We talked about the intro. Go watch his video. The video is called I Tried Posting Only Business Content for 30 Days. It was an excellent video. So we're going to talk about the 6 shifts again, and I'm going to be more concise with that. Shift 1, he went from edutainment to education. Education worked out better. Shift number 1, he went from a for us to a for you, and when he went with the for us, his colleagues and the gym associates that he normally teaches, it was not the same as when he was doing the for you and reaching a broader audiences. Shift number 3, he went from wide to narrow. He experimented with both. And which leads into point number 4, he experimented with both, and he had more success doing the business content. And that was narrow. It was about 9%, is what he said. 9% of his audience, or the general population, are business owners. 91% is the rest of people. Okay. And by doing that, right, shift number 4, he went from focusing on revenue to views, and then from focusing on views to revenue. And when he focused on views, his revenue dipped. There was a difference between people that watch for views and people that watch his longer form content to actually, he talked about ad spend, to actually produce revenue for his business, which includes he got more book sales. He got more people purchasing his products, and he got more people applying to work with his particular business. Shift number 5, he emphasized long videos over shorts. You just get more time to talk about the concepts, right? Business owners understand successful business owners understand. They understand that you're not going to be able to give them all of the information they need in a 30-second short or a 15-second Instagram reel or Facebook reel, whatever it is, or a TikTok. Business owners understand that. Successful business owners understand it. Okay. And shift number 6 that he talked about, assume nothing. You can't assume that people know who you are. So he had concrete data that prove people don't know who he are, despite who he is, despite how successful he is, and despite how many people he helped achieve success, people still don't remember who this guy is. And he's got 2.4 million views. So he talked about he needs to introduce himself. And I want you to consider the same thing. And particularly what I was talking about, you're going to hear people say, cut out your intro, cut out your trailer, cut out this, cut out that. People don't know who you are. So I would caution you not to listen to that feedback unless you pay for a professional assistant or you got an objective opinion. Don't listen to your Aunt Harry, your Uncle Lily, whoever. Don't listen to these people. They don't have businesses. They don't have the same success that you want to have. They don't understand your business objectives, goals. Okay. And so that recaps that video and the main shifts that I wanted to communicate. Be careful who you listen to. Personally, I was thinking about a particular woman. She's like, Jerome, do this, do that, do that. And I wasn't listening to her because I did not pay for her opinion. I paid a coach, and that coach told me, Jerome, start your podcast, get it going. And I've been doing that, and I've been on that path. And listening to that coach, of course, there are things that I can do to improve, but there are things that I can do to improve, but I would rather listen to professional and experienced advice before I make those changes, because professional and experienced advice, they're going to understand and they're going to take into context. Jerome, what are your goals with the podcast? What are your goals with social media, YouTube? What are you doing? Is it for views? No, you'll realize a lot of my content is not for views. A lot of my content is because I deal with customers, I deal with prospects, and I have to communicate these complex topics. And I take those videos and I send them a video sometimes. Right. Sometimes I'll do a pep talk where, as an example, we have a role playing call, and there was a woman named Tiffany, and Tiffany was like, I'm struggling with doing video. And I created an entire video on how to implement video communication into her business. So what was my goal there? Was it to get views? No, my goal was to communicate to her so she can understand how to get comfortable on video. Okay. So that's the bottom line. Be careful who you listen to. This was an excellent video by Alex Hormozi, and I recommend that you check out the same video.